Greetings and welcome to episode 67 of the Why I Love Disney podcast. We are back at you with season 3, second episode in season 3. I'm here with my friends David and Easton. What is up, fellas? How are you doing?
Hey, Dustin.
Hey, how's it going?
Man, I could not be better. We just finished basketball season with my kids and started soccer season yesterday. So it never ends. It's always going. But excited to be sitting here with you guys to talk about all things Disney and theme parks and all the stuff we love. So let's get right to the news, man. There's a lot of stuff going on with Disney, and most importantly, and this is one of my favorite episodes, the episode we do right after the Oscars is one of my favorites. And every time we've done this, we talk about Disney at the Oscars. So I thought we would start today by talking about all of the Disney tie-ins with the Oscars. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Okay.
Let's do it.
This is going to be a very short conversation because from what I can tell, Disney had one nomination that did not win, and that was for Elemental in the Best Animated Film category. So yeah, honestly, I want you guys' opinion on this. Is this sort of a concrete example of the hits Disney has taken over the last couple of years creatively? Listen, because the critics will say this is all political. This is all about, just people taking shots, whatever. Well, my thought is when you go to the Oscars and Disney, which usually is just well represented in both nominations and winners, swinging and missing pretty much. I mean, Elemental, let's give it its due, right? It's back, Pixar back doing what Pixar does. We're grateful what seems like we're on an upward trajectory. But this sort of seems like indication that it's not the politics as much. They're just making stuff that's not as great as it was a few years ago. Would you agree with that? What is your take on that?
Well, first, I did not watch the Oscars this year at all. Like, I didn't even watch part of it. Probably the first time in a while. I mean, I knew it was on. I just really wasn't that interested. And as far as Elemental, I don't think that's really Pixar back to doing what Pixar does. I thought it was one of the weaker Pixar movies overall. So I don't think it's to the standard of a movie like Ratatouille or Up or Inside Out, the ones of the 20-teens or the late 27, 8, 9, that era. Certainly not the earliest. So no, I don't think they're quite where they are. So, I mean, I knew that all the talk was that The Boy and the Heron, which I haven't seen yet, was going to win animated movie. I know it's got a really high score from critics on Rotten Tomatoes and a very high score with the audience. So I knew that was going to win. So there just really wasn't a lot that I was interested in. I do think the fact that they got no nods from their community is a sign of something. I mean, they didn't have a lot out, but what they did have out did not rise to the top.
Easton, what do you think? Are you kind of with David on that Elemental was not very good? And when I say it, I should clarify, I haven't seen it. But when I say it was kind of coming back, I mean, it got nominated for an Oscar.
True.
So that's my only thing with it, right?
True. But I always say in that category there aren't many to choose from. I mean,
That's
really
true.
just aren't.
That's a great point. I mean, you run out of them at some point, right?
Just about every studio that has one out is probably going to get something nominated. Sometimes Disney has two, so.
Right. Well, Across the Spider-Verse was nominated, and that was legitimately, in my opinion, a fantastic movie. One of those kind of can't miss. But again, that's Sony, not Disney.
Did you think it was good as the first?
I think it was it's that middle one. Yes, I do, but not like you. It wasn't. So here's what happens, in my opinion. The first one was groundbreaking, blow your mind. The second one moves the story, and I actually think there were elements of it that were even better than the first. But I think what they're doing now is setting us up for this trilogy. And so that second, it's like Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, I do think it was better than the first, actually.
Okay.
But again, it wasn't because it wasn't out of left field. There was high expectations because of it. It wasn't quite the same sort of satisfaction, right, in it, knowing that there's more. I thought it was incredibly creative. Yeah. So I haven't seen the Boy and His Heron either, which I want to really badly now that it beat out a movie I loved. But all that to say, Easton, what do you think? Do you think this is a sign of Disney just sort of floundering a little bit creatively the last few years?
Well, I think it definitely shows what kind of where Disney is, because you kind of always, in the past, you kind of just assume that they're going to have, if not one, a couple things nominated. And that could be a thing with, like, just in general. There's not been a whole big catalog of things that released. I think I probably liked Elemental a little bit more than you did. We went and saw it together, and I think I liked it a little more. I didn't love it, though. I thought it was perfectly fine. Like, it's like one of those movies that you go and you see and you're like, this is fine.
I thought it was fine, but I thought that from a storytelling thing, it had so many holes and places it lagged, and so many things. It's like doesn't even make sense, which is crazy in an animated movie because nothing should really make sense. But when you've got two characters, fire and water, that are supposed to be falling in love, and it's like suddenly they're just in love, and you're like going, what happened? I missed something here. Like, what? Okay, they're together now. But anyway,
it takes you five, like, you watch the movie for 5 minutes and you go, oh, this is Romeo and Juliet. Immediately,
yeah.
You can kind of know what the story is barely into the introduction.
Yes, and so in something like that, you're expecting them to take it somewhere that's kind of blow your mind, because it is this, it is a classic tale that they're doing their own version. So I don't know. It had some okay moments. Oh my goodness, I just thought it was boring in places, and that's rare for me. There have been actually the last few, that movie and Strange World, I fell asleep in parts of them, and I've never done that in any Disney movie ever. Except, I will confess, 2011's Winnie the Pooh. I think I fell asleep in the theater with the kids for that one. Not that it was bad. It was just it was a slower paced movie, and it was very much geared to very small, and the music was very much geared to small children. It just kind of was like, a big blanket. But this was different. This wasn't a warm blanket. I just, there were places I just got a little tired. So,
well, they whiffed on the Oscars, and Oppenheimer, of course, was the huge winner. Again, that's Universal. Universal, again, firing on all cylinders, at the box office, at the parks, and otherwise. And I think there's some. I think we were mentioning before we got on, David. The news that Disney is not at least laying down taking this. There's been some, I think, firings or people who have left their positions recently. Who are the in relation to movies in particular?
Well, I mean, they let the Sean Bailey, who was over the live action, at least over what people credit over the live action animated remakes, like the Beauty and the Beast and the Little Mermaid and Lion King, all of these. So he had some hugely successful movies, but some that haven't done as well. He's moving on. Of course, they didn't say he was let go or anything like that, but he's moving on. So most of the talk online was that he was moved on, and they've had just this weekend they let go someone who's over Imagineering that's only been there since 2020, who's been over some of the restylings, I think, of hotels, probably Tiana's, some of these attract some things like that, and so this person's been let go or is moving on, as was what the website said. So yeah, there's been some stirring up, so it's interesting to see, and they're getting a lot of I know you've been crazy busy with soccer and everything, but there's a lot of news I've sent you some links you need to catch up on, because Bob Iger had another interview with Morgan Stanley where they asked him it was mostly easy questions. He's very laid back. But he has an investment. He has Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo, who's a former CFO and worked at Disneyland Paris. Of course, it was Euro Disney then. Was with the company 30 some years. They are trying to get board seats, and Iger is fighting them very much. And so even Disney, apparently, I just saw that Hollywood Reporter has an article out that Disney's fighting back. They must have put out a video about the two of them, kind of slamming them. But earlier this week, Nelson Peltz and Jay Rasulo did a video where they sat down and talked to an interviewer who asked questions that went on their website that just, kind of talked about why they want to be on the board so bad. And there was a really good, they got a really good response from fan base as I saw online. But there are some people that are pushing back, like, who do they think they are that they know more than Bob Iger? I'm not, I'm a fan more than the stockholder side of things, but they've not, like we're saying, they've got a lot of things that aren't going well. The movies haven't done well for over a year. There are a lot of complaints about the parks, that the parks aren't moving fast enough, with Universal Park building a new whole land down the street. There's just a lot going on, and I definitely think that when I watched this Nelson Peltz Jay Rasulo interview, you definitely saw their love, especially Jay Rasulo. I mean, you could just tell that's somebody that really is in that camp of people that work for the company because they loved it.
Yeah.
And Nelson Peltz, I think, comes across as somebody who has a huge investment in the Walt Disney Company and wants it to be making more money, and probably doesn't agree with a lot of decisions and wants to be on the board to sway some of those decisions. But I don't think that Bob Iger wants anybody there swaying his team. He has assembled a team that does what he wants it to do. And, a couple of years ago, I was going to get us to read his book together, but he's very much about his legacy and the legacy that he's leaving. And he doesn't want, I think this is just my opinion, he doesn't seem like the kind of person that wants anybody else influencing anything, including Walt Disney. I mean, he doesn't, or Michael Eisner. He is about his ideas and what he's done. And, that's a very prominent personality in a lot of business. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, whether they can get on this board. I get the feeling from everything I'm seeing that they're not giving up. If they don't get on this time, I expect them to be back again later, trying still again. So the pressure's really on the current leadership to have some big wins. And in the interview with Bob Iger, they asked him what his biggest, what he was looking forward to, and he kind of said Deadpool. And that was, a lot of people were pointing out online that was something that was greenlit by Bob Chapek. So, right. Again, lots of interesting things to watch.
Well, I think there's two things that jump out to me as you were explaining that. One, I stand by I think in the first episode of season 3, we kind of gave an overview of our opinions of how things have gone. And I still stand by if you're not making money and you're not putting out hits and people are the park numbers are stagnant, that will not go on for much longer. Money talks. I believe my heart of heart that if one thing is true, it's that money will talk ultimately. On the other side of that, and I think that what we're seeing with this Nelson Peltz, and hearing you describe, and Jay Rasulo, in their interview, and the way you described it, I think fans, the Disney fan base, wants to believe that the people in charge love it as much as they do,
right,
and care as much as they do.
Exactly.
And I think that's why you even sounded hopeful in your tone there, David, that these two guys might be able to get on the board and change things. And I think if that's the sentiment among Disney fan base, that tells us something, that we just don't trust the leadership right now, that they are about what Disney was originally about: imagination, telling great stories,
right,
family entertainment, right?
Well, I think that it's very hard because when you're watching things like this online, you don't really know Bob Iger. It's like when you're watching anything political, you hear what they say, you try to, based on their comments and their actions, you make the best choice if you're the person that's going to be voting. So it's really hard to know, but and there definitely was pushback from people, a lot of people that were like, they're gonna destroy the company. They want to get up their hands on it so they can sell off all the parts. And I didn't hear that, and I don't think somebody like Jay Rasulo, who's been there much longer than Bob Iger, I don't think that sounded like his his kind of motivation. But again, I don't know. He does not have, in my opinion, they're looking for board seats. They're not looking to be the CEO. And they were even emphatic about that they said we're not here to replace anybody. Yeah, I'm not sure that most people watching would think that Jay Rasulo had the personality of a CEO like a Bob Iger that's very much a political figurehead type person, which is kind of unfortunate because there's sometimes these I think he was somebody that a lot of people at one time thought was in line for that position, and then he kind of got passed over. It's probably why he left the company. That's some older history going back to like 10 years ago. But yeah, he was part of the new expansion in Fantasyland. Again, he worked at Euro Disney for a while, but we'll see. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what's best. But I do like that there's some people at least challenging what's going on right now. I disagree. Bob, said that they're a distraction and that they're if he gets just his exact kind of his words were like, I can't get distracted by this because if I get distracted, the whole company gets distracted. They need to be distracted. They need something that says, wake up. Wake up. You've got to do better. You've got to make better movies. You've got to get some new things in the park that get people excited. That's what I think anyway, as a fan.
Well, that's interesting. I can't wait to read up on some of that. That boardroom drama is a lot of fun. To think about even that Chapek, the switch to and then from, the abrupt, how all that went down was really fascinating too. And let's just be honest, there's been a lot of they could make a movie. Disney should make a movie about the boardroom drama.
Somebody needs to do that online. That could be a whole YouTube channel where you reenact it.
That could be great. Maybe that's their next hit, is showing all the air and the dirty laundry of the boardroom.
Well, and again, way more dirty laundry in the news. I think that's a sign when there's more news about your management and your leadership than your content. I mean, that's just not a good sign.
Well, I will say the stock price is up year to date, 23%, 112 today. That's markedly higher than it was a year ago.
But I also think one of the things you need to check out is that Nelson Peltz, they put out a 130-page document just showing the past 10-year history, and even that stock going up and down, and what people have actually earned over the past 10 years.
Oh, it's not. I actually saw an article. It talked about how in a 10-year investment, 90% of people who invested at any point are down right now.
Yes.
And it was pretty remarkable how poor the stock had performed over this long period of time. But I will say, I bought some about a year, when it was, it was trading about $78, which was lower than before COVID, or during COVID at the day at low. It's remarkable. So it just seemed like it can't stay here forever, right?
Right.
They own too much stuff, but at the same time, it's going up because the market's going up. It's not going up because of anything the company seems to be doing correctly now. In fact, I think there's more bad news coming before there's good news coming.
Well, it's also it's an interesting study just in leadership and personality styles, because if you go back and look at Walt, which they don't ever want to do, but if you go back and look at Walt, this was somebody who wanted to succeed at all costs. Okay, he's invested everything into this company. Now, I disagree with a lot of the versions that kind of say he was driven to prove to his dad that he could. I think he loved what he was doing. I think he was somebody who loved what he was doing, who had a strong, gruff personality on the other side. And so, but he wanted to succeed at all costs because he just wanted to succeed. Now, sometimes you get leadership in that wants to succeed, but it's a different perspective. The perception of success sometimes is more important than actual success. Whether you create
if you're a successful executive versus a successful entrepreneur versus a successful storyteller versus they're all different objectives in the end.
Exactly. And sometimes it takes about 10 years to see where somebody's motivation lies, and you kind of come back and go, oh, look at this book you put out about your legacy and all these things. And even somebody this week, and I'm not saying this, but they were like, man, he's in it for what the legacy he creates and the money that he makes personally, and it's not about this company at all. He's just not, and I only bring that up because, again, that's, after a while, I think fans start to go, is this right? I mean, people did it, they did it with Michael Eisner, and he had done incredibly creative things, and they still get to a point where it's like, hey, has this run its course? Are you really invested in this, or is it more about you now? What's going on?
Right.
So it's an interesting thing we got to watch for the next few months. It's going to be earnings call coming, I guess, in April, so we'll see what happens then.
Fascinating. Well, it will be interesting to see, and that's the big Disney news. I think there's some talk about California park expansions and things like that, but nothing huge to go over. But will be interesting. I always love catching up on this with you guys. It makes me want to go explore a little bit more. So yeah, Easton came up with this fantastic idea, and just the transitions out of the news. So we've done our top list. We've done our bracket challenges. Remember it's March. It is March. I think it's time for a bracket.
I wondered if you wanted to do a bracket this year, because we've got to get on it.
Absolutely. We'll announce that next week. But this is Easton's brainchild. Easton came up with this. Easton, go ahead. I'll let you just take over here. Tell us what we're doing right now. This is a lot of fun.
Okay, well, I wish I could say I came up with this completely on my own.
Just take credit. It's all your idea. No one did this before right now, ever.
Okay, sure. So this is completely my idea.
Yes.
No one's ever done this before, so I thought we should be the first. I thought it would be a really fun idea to ask you guys kind of a little game of top 5, where we go through and we each give our top 5 Disney sidekicks. So we go around one by one and we kind of walk each other through what our top 5, it could be your favorite or your most likable or what you think is the most well-developed character, sidekicks across Disney, whether that's, the animated features or Pixar, all that good stuff.
I love
and then
this.
We can kind of see where some overlap is, or
not only that, we can debate whether or not they're a sidekick or a co-star.
Yeah, exactly.
Or we can debate there's all sorts of things, dude. I'm so excited about this. When you mentioned this, my brain went several places, and I love, because I'm gonna there's some people on my list that they're on there because they're the first ones that popped in, not necessarily on a further thought. There's probably like a definitive list that I might even agree with. But mine is regulated towards what popped in my head first. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to tell you
All
guys
right,
why you don't have good picks.
Likewise, yeah.
And I will go on record for saying once again that I don't like picking my favorites.
That's why we do the top. People ask, what's your favorite movie? I say I don't have a favorite. I have a top 10 list. Exactly.
Yeah. This is a little bit easier list than picking what I think is the greatest of something.
Okay.
Those are always the hardest.
Well, who's going first? David, you should start.
Yeah.
Give us number 5.
No, you guys go first.
No, I'll go first. All right, here we go. I'll give you number 5 because I know you guys. Mine at my 5th, and I have some honorable mentions too. But I know neither one of you guys are going to have this one because this is not an animated one. Ned Leeds. Ned. Spider-Man.
Oh.
Okay.
He is. I guess he's animated some too. Just not. Disney hasn't animated him yet. But Ned is one of my favorite sidekicks. He's the actor portrayed particularly with Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home, is Jacob Batalon, and I think he's great, and I think he's a fantastic sidekick, and he is in at my number 5. Locked in. Final answer.
That's a good number 5. I can't believe I didn't pick somebody from Spider-Man.
All right.
That's a good number 5.
And it is my only superhero representation here, right? So, but I wanted to get him in because I feel like he's the definition of a sidekick, a loyal friend who's there, shows up in key parts to either help the character or advance the story. And he's funny. He's just great. I love him. He's the quintessential sidekick.
He is a quintessential sidekick. I did not think of him because I didn't think of Marvel. Because when I think of the Avengers, I don't think of them having sidekicks like Robin. But that's a good one.
My number 5 is actually Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. I think he's hilarious. He has some incredible one-liners.
That's great. And now you mentioned that Emperor's New Groove is one of your favorite Disney movies of all time, right? That's episode.
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
This makes sense. And I think he works. David, what do you think about that one? Did he make your list at all?
I don't want to tell you that yet, but I think that's a great one. No, I think it's a great one. I might comment on that later. But I wanted, you guys may not know this guy, but there's a great voice actor named Sterling Holloway, who most people know as the voice of Winnie the Pooh, but he was also the voice of the Cheshire Cat, just multiple characters. And I really wanted, he's such a great actor and such a great Disney character voice person. I wanted to put him in there. I just couldn't find one where he's really a side. He's a minor character a lot, but he's not a sidekick. And then the other person I really kind of I thought about, but I didn't put in my list was, because not necessarily my favorite, but I thought somebody worthy of a top 5 should be Tinkerbell, because she's Peter Pan's sidekick. Also was the official kind of mascot of Disney TV and the parks. I mean, she's a huge president. In fact, I was telling Easton at one point, we were talking about this a couple of the days ago, that when Disney started the TV show, he didn't really want to tie Mickey and those characters to his Disneyland TV show because you don't know where this is going yet. So they used Tinkerbell, because Peter Pan had just come out. They kind of used her as the mascot for the show. And I always think that's kind of interesting that she kind of stepped in to something you would have thought was a Mickey Mouse role, and she kind of took that. Plus, she was probably easy to animate for that weekly series. But anyway, those are kind of my 2 honorable mentions. Anything Sterling Holloway did and Tinkerbell. But for my number 5, surprise, I have Kronk.
Oh, look at that.
How about that?
We didn't even talk about that.
So I also had
Y'all
Kronk.
been hanging out together a lot. All right.
And the reason Kronk is on my list is I think he's really like one of the fun. Kronk and Yzma from Emperor's New Groove, probably the funniest Disney villains ever. And we watched the movie so many times, especially traveling, just because it was always a great travel movie when you had kids in the car, in the van, and you're listening to movies. If you can't see the movie, it's a great movie to listen to. The lines are just great. So, yeah, I had to give it to Kronk.
Sterling Holloway, awesome. Is he the voice of Sir Hiss?
He is.
That's a sidekick.
No, he's not Sir Hiss. No, he's not Sir Hiss. That's Terry. He's the voice of Kaa.
This is blowing my mind.
He's the voice of Kaa in Jungle Book.
The fandom here is off the charts.
No, it's not. That's normal.
Listen, folks, this is why I love Disney. We don't lie here. This is fandom. This is fandom, y'all.
Sterling Holloway is the stork in Dumbo. He's Flower in Bambi. He's Roquefort the Mouse in the Aristocats. He's Winnie the Pooh. And he's also well known, like from if you were a kid of the 70s, 80s, that era, you saw a lot of shorts, and even in school, he would be the narrator for. He just did a lot of voiceovers that you don't even beyond the cinematic. He did a lot of Disney voiceovers for shorts, recordings. He was just there everywhere. Yeah.
Well, shout out.
Yep, Sterling.
Give him props, David. To Sterling. All right, number 4. Easton, you just want to keep it going?
Sure, let's do it. So my number 4 is Archimedes from Sword in the Stone.
Ooh, okay.
We just recently, a couple weeks ago, rewatched Sword in the Stone, and he's kind of this grumpy owl. He just makes me laugh. A lot of my picks are like people that I'm like, he's really fun.
He's a great character. He was the guy that voiced him was an actor named Junius Matthews. He's also famous for being Rabbit.
And when you Google Archimedes, you get a Greek mathematician and physicist. And he lived about
was.
287 BC to 212 BC.
And you know, I love me a good Greek mathematician. So
A great name for a wise owl.
Awesome. That's an interesting thing. I don't want to get us off track here, but I always love like looking up the names of these characters sometimes, like what they actually mean, like especially when you're talking Greek mythology and stuff like that. Like, okay, who is this character and what does his name mean, right? Sometimes that's interesting. So that's really cool. My number 4 is Abu from Aladdin. I like Abu. Aladdin's one of my favorite all-time animated Disney movies. And I feel like, to me, it was one of those, like, the genie felt like not a sidekick. It felt like another lead character. But I didn't want to leave Aladdin unrepresented. And I think Abu is a loyal friend, you know, kind of like Ned, always there when he needs to be, coming through in the clutch to help save the day. Another quintessential sidekick. So I love Abu right here. And you might even throw the carpet in, too. You know, they're kind of both together there. So that was my number 4.
That's a good 4. That's a good
David,
4.
you're next.
Am I next? All right. Well, for my number 4, I actually went with the genie.
Okay.
And I think the thing that's tough about Aladdin is you're right. There's Abu, there's the genie, there's Iago with Jafar. There's Raja.
I have him in my honorable mentions.
Raja
for sure.
with Jasmine.
Yep.
So there are a lot of sidekicks in that movie. They went big nostalgia there, but I really think that the genie fits the perfect like buddy movie where you've got Aladdin's obviously the main character. It's his story, but the genie's really with him the whole way, like in that subordinate what can I do for you role until he kind of gets his happy.
I could go with
end,
that.
but-
I can get down with that. I kind of, for me, it was sort of like saying Buzz Lightyear, or what, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, but I get it. He is sort of like, he's the genie. Like, he is
Right.
providing support for, by definition, Aladdin. So
yes, if there were a lot of people that I threw off my list because I really thought they were just more characters than sidekicks, but I put him in there.
We'll let it slide because he's from Aladdin. That's a great.
And
great
I
movie.
wanted I leaned a little old school on this, so I wanted at least one from the 2000s, and I got one from the 90s.
Old school, as in like, you know, this is old school, or this is more new school. What were you meaning by that?
Just the characters
this is
that
like
I picked.
35 years old. This movie.
Well, old school then for Disney.
Okay, gotcha.
That's kind of the middle years for Disney.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. All right, so now we're to number 3. David, why don't you go ahead and give us number 3?
All right, my number 3 was Archimedes.
Look at that.
Okay, all right.
But
We
that
got some
I
overlap here.
would say / Merlin, because Merlin's one of my is Merlin a sidekick? Is he a sidekick to Arthur? Of course, in Arthurian legend, he would be the magician would be the sidekick to the king. Of course, he's probably the more dominant character in the whole movie than the boy, because he's leading most of the things. But both of those characters, I could have gone Archimedes, or if you called Merlin a sidekick, I could have gone with both of those. I think they're two very underrated characters. They actually pop up more than you realize. They've even had whole shows in the park based on Merlin and the Sword and the Stone, there in Fantasyland, where you pull the sword up. They used to have a live show that took place every day, multiple times a day. So he's had his moments, but kind of underrated. So that's my number 3.
I like both of those, and I do like that you had you held on some honorable mentions in case somebody got picked. That's good. I like it all. All right. So my number 3. This is where I'm gonna throw you guys. I would bet money neither of you have this one. Barley Lightfoot.
Whoa.
You did like
wild.
Onward.
I love Onward, and man, that dude makes me cry. He is such a big-hearted, awesome dude, voiced by Chris Pratt, and I want to watch Onward. It's one of the most underrated Pixar movies I think that exists, and I say that as often as I can on this show, that everyone needs to see it over and over again. It didn't get the credit it's due because it came out the week before the world shut down. But Barley Lightfoot is an amazing sidekick, supportive of his brother. So big-hearted. I love him.
I do think that
Everything about him.
Yeah, they're very new characters. So again, it's like you gotta love them to for them to pop in your mind. So I think that's a great
Or
one.
you have to have seen them, actually. And I think a lot of people still have not seen Onward.
Yeah, I do
And
think
y'all need to see it.
The best thing about that movie are Chris Pratt and Tom Holland's performances. Their characters are the strongest part. They're strong. Those characters are stronger than the story. The story's good, but those characters are even stronger. And I would agree that he is a very good sidekick and probably one of the best of the new. That I really struggled. Like nobody jumped out in my head from the new. Like, well, there were some like that I could have put, but they're not my favorite. So, yeah.
All right, Easton, you're up.
My number 3, I had a really hard time with. And I'll bet you guys don't have this character on your list. But my number 3 is from Tarzan. And it's Tantor.
I
like it.
Comedy character.
I like reaching out there and the Tarzan. That's great.
Yeah, I think the voice of Tantor is also the voice of Al from Toy Story 2. I think it's the same guy. But Tantor is one of those characters that even if he's not with Tarzan the whole time, every time he thinks of Tarzan, it's always in a sense of, we're here to help this guy. Tarzan gets captured by the guys on the ship. The only reason they go is because Tantor is like, we're going, he needs help and we're going to help him, right? And so that's why Tantor's made my number 3 slot.
I love it. That's a good one. You came through. I think, with number 3. So go ahead and lead us out in number 2.
Yeah, so my number 2 spot goes to Timothy Q. Mouse from Dumbo.
That's a good.
There
All
right, going old school. Okay.
A bit of a left field pick for my number 2. He kind of gives me, in a sense, Jiminy Cricket vibes, but he's really the only guy that is Dumbo's friend when everyone else kind of throws him aside because of his ears, right? Timothy Mouse is the only one that's like, no, you're gonna be a star, and I'm gonna help make that happen for you.
That's a true buddy film. Yeah, that's probably the OG.
I love it. That is a good one. I also think it's interesting that we haven't really stepped on each other too much yet. I feel like we're about to, but I'm gonna help. David, what's your number 2?
Well, before I say my number 2, I just wanted to point out, because I started to say it a minute ago, I don't think we're going to... Well, maybe I should hold this off because I don't want to overstep what you might say. So I'll just say my number 2 is another classic. It's Mr. Smee.
Okay, yeah.
Captain Hook's sidekick. And probably one that I've always liked ever since I was a kid. I just always thought he was a funny character. He's voiced by a classic animation voice actor named Bill Thompson, who... outside of Disney was very famous for a character called Droopy, which was before my time. He was a dog, and had that voice that he uses for that, he uses it for the White Rabbit. And what's that?
He's the 8th.
Droopy.
He's the 8th dwarf.
He could have been. But Droopy, he was like an MGM character or something, but Bill Thompson uses that same voice for Mr. Smee and the White Rabbit and several other Disney characters. It pops up. It's just a funny voice. It's like one of those that you hear a lot of people try to imitate, but nobody can quite do it the same. And he does a lot of other Disney characters. He does a ton of Disney characters. He's in almost everything from the 50s, 60s. He's in Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, all these movies. But Mr. Smee's just always been like a great character, even in other Disney, in non-Disney Peter Pan movies. Mr. Smee is usually a funny character, because he deals with a narcissistic, crazy, pirate leader, and so he's usually like this light-hearted character that somehow finds the best outlook in the middle of a horrible situation, just because he's just so naive and innocent in his own piratey way. So I picked him. Probably someone I would pick more as a dad. It's funnier to me now than it was when I was younger, but he's one of my favorites, and a great villain sidekick.
I love that pick. I love it. And I didn't think of him. We're running out of picks here, but my number 2 is Mike Wachowski
All right.
Okay.
from Monsters Inc. Billy Crystal. And dude, like I think to me, if you see, I'm going for like the comedic, buddy, loyal friend, essential to the story sidekicks, right? And dude, I love it. I love Billy Crystal's voicing. I love that scene where he gets cut out of the commercial and everybody, it's so awkward and everybody's like, oh no. And he's like, there I was. Everything about it's just
And
amazing. His romance,
when they put the barcode over his face, but he's still excited that he's on the magazine.
it's perfect. It's perfect. I love him and I love that movie. And I just wanted to make sure it was represented here at my number 2 spot.
Well, that's a really good one, and I would have him on my list. He's one that I went back and forth. Like, is he half of a main character, like you said with the genie? So I definitely, if I thought of Sully as the main character and Mike as the secondary, I would have picked him. I would have had him on my list too. He's a great one.
I probably would have had a lot of Pixar movies on my list, but I had a hard time because those are all buddy films. I had a hard time.
I've avoided a few that are really obvious, and we better get these, or people are gonna be mad at us, like for not putting these on here.
After we get through the list, we can talk about other characters that we considered and then why we didn't. We can finish
All right.
that.
Do you want me to start with my number 1?
Yeah.
Would you like me to do that? All right. My number 1
Here we go.
comes from my favorite Disney animated movie of all time.
I gotta think of what that might be. I can't even guess what that is.
It's the one I've seen the most for sure. And it is Little John from Robin Hood.
Oh,
Okay.
Voiced by Phil Harris.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know much about Phil Harris. David, fill me in. Tell me all about Phil Harris.
well, Phil Harris. Phil Harris was a popular actor and singer that happened to be a friend of Walt Disney, and so I think that's how he ended up first as Baloo. They were in making Jungle Book, and the guy that wrote The Bare Necessities, a writer named Terry Gilkinson, had actually done the whole movie, the score, all the songs, and it was a very true telling of the Jungle Book. And Walt came back and he just didn't like it. He didn't like where they were headed, and he said, you know what? I don't want to do a telling of the book. I just want to use the characters. I want a fun, snappy version of Jungle Book. And I think it was Walt that said we should get, Phil Harris to do the bear. And so that's kind of where that, he was Baloo. And then probably after Walt passed away and they came out with Robin Hood in 1973, everybody just went back and said, hey, we should do Phil Harris again. He had already done Baloo. In 1970, he does O'Malley the Alley Cat from Aristocats. And then 1973, he does Little John, which is a lot like Baloo in a lot of ways, and O'Malley. He kind of plays the same character, but it's a good one. He's definitely a true sidekick. I did not know Robin Hood was your all-time favorite.
Yeah, I think that's my all-time favorite Disney movie. Like, I just, as a kid, I've seen it over and over and over again. With my kids, it's one of the first ones I bought on DVD and watched when Disney Plus came out. We watched it again, and it holds up, man. I love it. I can still sing that opening.
Yeah, that's
I
one
can
of
whistle that tune. I can do it.
It's one of John David's. It's one of John David's top. It's like John David's was always as a kid was Hercules and Robin Hood, back and forth. Those two.
All right, who's gonna give their number 1?
Yeah.
Which one of you guys wants to go next?
My number one, and I'm really feeling sad because I meant to put Baloo on my list and I forgot. I go back and forth. I would have gone back and forth between Little John and Baloo, but that definitely should have been on my list. I might have to bump Kronk down to 6 and put Baloo back in there. But my number 1, I went with the OG sidekick with Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah.
Yep, I knew you would. I knew it. And he had the only reason he's not my number 1 because I knew he'd be your number 1.
Well, it's kind of weird. I've gotten more fond of him as I've gotten older, and when we years ago we were doing something with a family at one of the parks where they like assign you characters, and they kind of assigned me that character. and so it's kind of stuck. He's like my icon on Disney Plus. I went with him. I think he's the true is a true sidekick, and he's definitely that character that's trying to get the main character where he's supposed to be. It's kind of that true. The main character can't do it without him. Got to have that sidekick with you, or you're just not the same person. And he sings the classic song that everybody associates with Disney. He was voiced by a guy named Cliff Edwards, who was a real popular vaudeville actor at the time, and he'd go on. The other thing is he would go on to do Jiminy Cricket for a long time beyond just a movie, because he would come back in other features. He was a narrator for a lot of things, so it was a long-standing character, and then one that they've definitely used through the years with the same sounding voice. I was not pleased. I didn't like the character as much in the live action Tom Hanks version.
I agree.
No, not even
Not
close.
the same.
Not the same. And another cool little bit of history there. He was designed by an animator named Ward Kimball, who had worked for Disney all the way through Snow White. And Ward had done a huge scene where the dwarfs eat soup and had a whole song. They had animated the whole sequence, and they hadn't colored it, but they hadn't painted it, but they had drawn the whole thing. It had taken him 6 months, and Walt cut the scene. And, imagine how when you've devoted 6 months of your life to a scene and it gets cut. And Walt said, but the next movie, I've got this major character. That's the legend anyway. Walt, talked him into staying and working on this cricket for Pinocchio, which is a very short, in the book, Pinocchio squashes the cricket really quickly. So Disney went a whole different direction with their cricket and basically invented this version of Jiminy Cricket as we know it. So, yeah, he's kind of the OG sidekick for Disney. So I went with him.
I love it. All right, Easton, you're closing it out.
My number one pick
Drum roll.
is Baymax from Big Hero 6.
That's a good one. I thought about him too. I couldn't decide. Good job. That's a good one.
I couldn't decide if he was another main character, but I do think he serves in the movie as Hero's companion.
I can go with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can see that. No, that's cool. That's a good one.
I did consider him, man. He's a great one.
And you've just got to, I have to give props to the team that animated Baymax, because I can only imagine how tough it probably was to make a robot with the only features he has are 2 dots and a line for his face. How you can make him so expressive throughout the whole movie. You know exactly how he's feeling, what he's thinking the entire time you're watching him, and that is wild to me.
Yeah. It's a great voice performance too, because he has to sound sincere and robotic at the same time. So it's a great performance. Really is.
It is great.
Yeah.
That's a good one, man.
Yeah.
I love it. Nice. That's a good dude. That's
Yes.
a good list. We kind of covered a lot here. There's a lot we didn't get into. I can't believe Mater is not on anybody's list.
I did think of him.
And I know there's I don't want to say them all.
Mushu from Mulan. The one I can tell you that from a merchandising standpoint, the two that are on everything, that if Disney puts out pins, plush, the two that are everywhere are Olaf, or Sven, Olaf or Sven,
and Sebastian.
Yeah, Sebastian and Flounder, Pascal from Tangled,
Cogsworth and
sidekick.
Lumiere.
Cogsworth and Lumiere. But they're the ones on all the merchandise. I probably steered away a little bit, like, just from those, because they are they're so predictable.
Yeah. No,
they're a lot of people's favorites. But again, those are just they were, they're huge characters though. Even Stitch appears on a lot of things like that. Some people would call Stitch Lilo's sidekick. So, but those are the characters that, you just see merchandise like crazy for. So I kind of typically lean towards the things that I feel like are getting sidestepped a little bit, and so
I totally.
But now
agree.
Jiminy, I mean, they do a lot of Jiminy Cricket merchandise as well. So
I feel like Jiminy, if we were doing it if we were to turn this, and this might be something for the future, another way to do what we just did is to have a draft. You know what I'm saying? And we each get random picks, and who would you take first? Number one in the draft, and for sidekicks, and I think like Jiminy would be the top pick. Yeah, if you were to do it that way. Like if this was somebody that's going to go on your team and they were assigned points that most people would agree with, right? You would take Jiminy first, and then close second. You know, you get down the list a little bit. Tinkerbell's probably, you know, the big ones, for sure.
Yeah, my list would definitely change if we were doing a draft.
Well, I wouldn't take Barley Lightfoot in the first round, because I think I'd get your value waiting till later on in the draft and could get him later,
Yeah.
like in the 7th or 8th round, or I could draft. He could be an undrafted free agent that I could pick up on my team,
Yeah.
and not even have you to pick on him. You know what I'm saying? So.
well, these are the fun thing about these are like it's not necessarily the ones that I think. If you said, what do you think are the greatest sidekicks? Like, oh, you mean like I got to decide who has the most power in Disney legend? Then there would be characters like Olaf, where you go, he's a merchandising juggernaut. But
Yeah.
not just not necessarily one of my favorite characters. I would rather hang with Mr. Smee, but
Right. I think these are all good, man. This is a lot of fun. I'm glad we did this.
Fun
and,
idea, Eason.
Cannot wait for the next one. We got to figure out on the next episode our bracket, our March bracket, which one we're gonna do. So
Yeah.
Yeah, when we did
do you
did
think,
our
David?
movie bracket, how many we did a full bracket. We did
64 movies. And it was, and again, people actually, I had some hate mail about this because they were like, you left out and da 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 da. And it was so, listen, all we did was go through top box office and Disney properties. We didn't just do Disney animation or Walt Disney World. It included Touchstone, it included Star Wars, it included Marvel. And of course, Marvel and Star Wars probably a little overrepresented, but dude, there's so many of those movies, and they're all make a ton of money, so they all made the bracket.
Yeah, and the thing I remember most about that was really shocked when we did that Swiss Family Robinson was in the top money-making movies of all time adjusted for inflation. So we had that in there over a lot of animated movies that people would consider bigger, more important movies. But Swiss Family, I mean, there were still some classics in there from the 60s that were holding strong in the income that they brought into the company. So
Totally. Well, here's the thing. We could ask our listeners, hey, what kind of bracket would you like us to consider? What kind of bracket would you like to be a part of? We might even put the blank bracket up online so you could download it yourself and follow along and make your own bracket. So let us know, what should we crown a champion? Should it be animated movies? Should it be all-time greatest heroes? Let us know what you think. You can find us at whyIloveDisney.com. You also, I think there's an Instagram, right? Is there an Instagram or something like that? Or a Twitter
Yes.
account? Find us. If you just look at whyIloveDisney.com, you can get to all that stuff and you can send us messages. We also ask if you would please be so kind as to rate us a 5-star review. We don't want your 3-star review. We don't want your 4-star review. We definitely don't want your 1 or 2-star review. We're only interested if you're willing to give us a 5-star review and then maybe share it with a friend as well. Jump in the conversation with us. We're thrilled that you would spend a little time with us this afternoon or this morning or this evening or this night, whatever it happens to be when you're listening. But we're thankful for you and we cannot wait for next time. David and Easton, you have anything else to say to everybody or to me?
I mean, it's been fun, guys. Thank you. Let's do it again.
Awesome.
Yeah, same time next week.
So long, farewell.